My fellow Americans, it is August in Washington, D.C. Members of Congress are home, back in their districts, doing district-y stuff. And thank God, because there has been a ton going on here in Washington, D.C. as far as defense, reforms, executive orders. We're just going to start at the top, right at the White House. Okay, when we think about defense, national security strategy, national defense strategy, and then down into everything else. So starting at the White House, we're seeing executive orders come out of the White House in the world of defense that we typically don't see, which is a great indicator, which means the president and everybody in the National Security Council is taking defense technology and defense acquisition and the reform of the business processes of the department more seriously than we've seen from the last administration, or even honestly in the first Trump administration. There wasn't so much effort or initiative or focus on reform. Obviously, we have the DOGE stuff going on, but in this case, we're seeing executive orders coming out that are specifically defense focused, which, I mean, I'm not a historian. I don't know if this is unprecedented, but it seems pretty unprecedented. And at a minimum, it's awesome. Starting about March, we start getting EOs that focus on procurement. So anybody who's been in this game for a day knows that the way that the DoD buys things is completely jacked up. The model that was put in place comes from the 1960s and when Robert McNamara was the Secretary of Defense. We were in a very industrial age, and he was a very industrial-minded kind of leader. Came out of big factories and large-scale manufacturing. There's a process to that, right? When you're building an aircraft carrier, there's a process, and it takes a long time, and you want to make sure that all your ducks are in the row as you move through the different stages of design, planning, construction. Well, that doesn't work for startups and for the way that software is just moving around the world. So we're basically burdened with a process within the Department of Defense of how they buy things that's completely irrelevant to the way that the consumer world just purchases software nowadays. So in this first EO that we saw about procurement, it goes after the Federal Acquisition Regulation. If this is a new term for you, we're going to do a whole rundown on what the FAR is. But essentially, after the Congress passes a law, it then gets kicked over to the executive branch, and the executive branch has to figure out how to implement that law, right? It's really easy to say, go do X, Y, Z in a paragraph or two in a bill, but then you got to figure out how that works in actuality, and the president being the CEO of the country, and then people who work at the executive branch as being the operational arm of the country, got to figure out how to do this. Well, this comes in regulations. So the Federal Acquisition Regulation is like a 10,000 page document that defines how we buy things in the government. And it's just old, it's clunky, and it just doesn't work. So the first thing they're doing is going after FAR cleanup, which is phenomenal. Like I said, we'll go into a totally breakout episode on that one and the changes to the FAR that are going to happen. Specifically, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but most modular open systems architecture, for people who speak English, that just means your cell phone. You have an Android or an Apple iOS based phone. The company owns the underlying architecture, and a world of third-party applications get to live in the marketplace and sell their things, right? Samsung didn't invent LinkedIn, Tinder, whatever, right? And then on the hardware side, the reason that we're able to do so many things, plug in, our phones to this, that, and the other, and get power and batteries and shit like that, is just because there's universal USB. And so you're probably using USB-C or whatever the new Apple one is. But it's universal, and everybody knows that they can build to that standard. So if everybody knows the software baseline they can build to, and everybody knows the hardware interface that they need to have, it makes it a lot easier to do business with the government because you know what the barrier of entry is, and you can build to that. You don't have to guess. So getting after the FAR, getting after requirements for MOSA so that everyone can play on a level playing field is phenomenal. They're moving towards a commercial first mandate. What does that mean? When we try to buy something in the department and you've jumped through the hurdles of finding someone who wants your thing, you've jumped through the hurdles of finding the person who buys the thing for that person because, spoiler, they're not the same person. Sergeant Mike wants all of the cool shit in the world. Sergeant Mike has zero money. You need to go find somebody whose first name is program manager or program executive officer to go buy your thing. So you've jumped through the hurdles of finding a user. You've jumped through the hurdles of finding somebody to buy that thing for you. And now it's got to go over to contracting. So how are we going to contract it? Well, there's like a Candyland kind of style flow chart. And in the past, it goes to, well, we need this thing. Let's go to a research and development organization within the DoD, whether that be an Office of Naval Research or an Army Applications Lab, or it could be go to a university-aligned research and development center, a UARC, an FFRDC, a federally funded research and development center, right? There's all kinds of mechanisms that they have, but the going in proposition was, we need this thing. We're so special as the DoD. Nobody could have ever made this thing up before. And we're going to start the process of building it, which also plays into this awful process of how we buy things, which takes way too long because software is not an aircraft carrier. So now we're in this situation that says, okay, let's just assume it's commercially available and go through the market research and the open solicitations, which is referred to as a CSO, a commercial solutions opening. And let's just go out to industry and see if this thing is there. Because I'm telling you right now, as somebody who's lived it, I'm much happier with an 80% solution today than a 100% solution 5 years from now. And then a big move is the DoD is the largest buyer of just things and stuff. They have a $1 trillion operating budget a year. It's the largest organization in the world by far. Like Walmart is the next closest organization in size and scale to the DoD, and it's not even close. So the GSA, the main buyer for things and stuff in the federal government, not just DoD, but GSA, the General Services Administration, I believe. Pens, pencils, paper, service contracts, clean government buildings. Those used to all be run all over the place by all the people who had money and needed things, and they're consolidating that under GSA. And I mean, that's just basic business principles 101. You get economies of scale when you have centralized buying, you know how much you're paying for things, and then you can negotiate better contracts. So right off the bat, we've seen a very commercial private sector approach to the reforms that just recognize that there are things we do in the DoD that are not aircraft carriers and hypersonic missiles. And in those cases, we should really be just buying things like you would in the commercial sector, because that's how competition works and that's how you get the best prices and deals. So lots of movement to that. Not surprised coming out of this administration. What does that mean for you guys? If you fall into any of those categories, if you've been held up by some crazy FAR process, well, that might not be the case anymore. And once these things start getting out of the way, you might be able to move a lot faster. So if somebody told you, hey, 2, 3, 4 years, you might want to consider what it looks like to execute in 6 months. If you're in hardware or software and you're not MOSA compliant, get there. If you are MOSA compliant and I don't know, maybe your competitors aren't, should flag that. And 3, if you do something that looks like I could just go to Walmart and buy it, or I could just contract it like lawn care services, you should really be focusing on how to do business with the GSA, because a lot of those contracts you have with some of these smaller organizations within the DoD may be going away. So then comes April. Like we're still in like March and April here. Next comes April. We have the acquisition modernization EO. This is looking at speed and flexibility. It's looking at major defense acquisition program reviews. So these are the actual programs that buy tanks, aircraft carriers, so on and so forth. Workforce reform, huge issues in the DoD with workforce right now. Look, I got it that the Doge guys are doing what they're doing, and having worked in the U.S. federal government for over 20 years, I can tell you there's a lot of shit that needs to be reformed. But we also have a workforce deficiency in some of the most critical areas where we actually need people. there's only so many things you can contract out. Some things are inherently government business, one of them being contracting officers. You cannot allow a non-government person to commit the U.S. taxpayer to obligations. It requires a government person, and there are massive deficiencies or massive shortfalls in the contracting officers that are going to help you get your things to your users once you find a user and find somebody with money to pay for it. There are small businesses that get through those first two hurdles and then they get rolled up in contracting with no contracting support to get the thing done. It's a bad situation, and they're trying to get after that with some workforce reforms. And then more language on buying commercial first. We're seeing a lot of that. It's layered in through everything that we've been seeing through the beginning of the year. The next one is interesting. Foreign military sales reform. So FMS. This is a whole other topic and subject area completely, but there's a lot of times where it's actually easier to sell your widget, whatever it is, to a foreign government. Now, if you're held up by ITAR, which means it's something that you can't sell to a foreign government without paperwork and administration and telling people that, right? We just don't want people like selling, I don't know, guns, bombs, crazy ass software to, North Korea. So there's good reasons it's in place, but this executive order gets after FMS reform so we can work with our partners better, we can sell things better, we can get through the process faster, and really just make sure that when we say in our national strategies that partners and allies are important, one, we are actually getting things to them faster, and two, you have more of an opportunity to operate in the international defense ecosystem. So big fan of that. More on that. We'll probably end up doing just a breakout on every single one of these because, they're so dense, and really at this point, we're just trying to catch up. EO on maritime dominance, shipbuilding, loan programs, using the Defense Production Act Title III. So these are big loans that are given, grants that are given to companies to do things that really doesn't make sense to do in a traditional commercial market. There are a lot of things that we need to do for national security. We need to deal with rare earths and natural resources. We need to deal with batteries and chips. And in the open competitive market, these things just don't make sense because an American, magnet coming to the market is going to be 20 times more expensive than the one from China. But we don't want to be relying on China for our supply chain. So there we have ways and means to do things in the U.S. that wouldn't necessarily make sense in the commercial market. DPA is a tool for that. Maritime shipbuilding. Shipbuilding in the United States has gone the way of the dodo and has been like that for decades. And there's a big piece of that folks in the White House and Congress are trying to bring back to the U.S., not because we think we're competitive globally, but because we don't want to be a slave state to China. EO's coming out a little bit outside of DOD again, but definitely important for the overall defense space, airspace sovereignty, and drone dominance. These are addressing FAA regulations, notice kind of procedures, notice to mariners. It addresses UAS and counter UAS training. It addresses BLOS, beyond line of sight operation of drones. So this one's critically important, especially for anybody in the drone space. Getting a BLOS waiver out of the FAA is like a Herculean task. As we look at what's going on in Ukraine and what's going on other places, but mostly Ukraine, these drones operate out of visual sight of the operator, right? The drones that kids play with, they can see them. They're right there. No big deal. But when you're talking about an FPV drone going 15K across the forward line of troops in Ukraine to go attack, a Russian position, you can't see these things anymore. So there's been this difficulty in drone manufacturers getting these waivers to operate and train beyond line of sight in the US as they build their products and train service members and government folks on how to use these things. So working to streamline a lot of that is going to be huge. And then I think the big banger that they rolled out right before they kicked out on kind of like Washington, D.C. summer break, not that they're not doing stuff, but it's a slower time. You got to get the big stuff out before August rolls around or nobody's paying attention. The AI action plan. So this is national level policy to get after AI, autonomy, how to train, how to secure it, how to automate and do different workflows, and how to do RDT&E, research development, testing and evaluation on AI and AI systems. I think it's very well established, bipartisan, bicameral, that the U.S. cannot fall behind in AI. Many people have equated that to today's nuclear arms race. I agree. So we're seeing a lot of initiative coming out of the White House on making sure that we are best in the world in AI. So rolling through all of these, before we move on to Congress, things are going to get easier to do business in the DoD as they go through procurement and FAR reform. It's going to become easier, hopefully more streamlined and quicker to do business with international partners. There's going to be more focus on the maritime environment. So if you're anywhere near the maritime environment, to include a sub-tier supplier, a subcontractor, you make a thing that might go on a manned or unmanned boat. Hopefully you'll be seeing some new opportunities and some more investments into the maritime space. And airspace and drone dominance is just the hotness right now. A lot of the restrictions that have been in place and a lot of the problems that drone manufacturers have had over the last few years are going to start going away, because the war in Ukraine has just shown this is the way of the future. We can't treat these things like toys, and we also can't treat them like missiles or hypersonics that they have to be like heavily regulated in the US. So there's going to be a lot of work to get through making that easier, because there's just a huge market, a huge demand, and a huge warfighter need. And then finally, AI, all things AI. If you're in AI, like, this is your time, right? Like, this is 2025 is your fucking year, right? Get in there, get active, do the things, understand what the government needs, create tools, and it's just honestly never been a better time to be in that space with the EOs that we have right now, and then that what trickles down to the DoD. I just think the hard part is going to be, you're in, I mean, you know, not even a red ocean, but you're in a red ocean full of sharks and everybody's in there. So figuring out your place and your lane in that is probably going to be key to survival, because everybody's sprinkling a little AI on everything now. Going down to Congress. So this is not the first time, and this is not the last time that I will say this. The Constitution clearly defines Article 1 as the roles and responsibilities of Congress, making them the supreme branch of our U.S. government, whether people in the executive branch, where I used to work, like it or not, but it's a fact. And Congress has a lot of roles, really three. I tell people this all the time. Congress basically does three things. They can start something or stop something in a law. They can give you money or take it away, or they can go on TV and yell and scream about things. All of them are important at different times, depending on what you need, right? We have seen great initiatives that come from all of those functions. I don't mean to be derogatory in any way, shape, or form. Sometimes I just want a senator to try to fight the head of the union on the Senate floor. I'm just saying, that's fucking, sometimes you need that. So in the roles and responsibilities of Congress, you have two sections in the Constitution that drive how Congress actually does things in relation to defense technology, and national security roles. The first one is Article 1, Section 8. And Article 1, Section 8 says a whole lot of shit. This is like the part where it says Congress has the responsibility to declare war, which they don't, but they should. Amongst many things that it says in Article 1, Section 8, it says govern, paraphrase here, but to govern the rules of land and naval forces, right? So what does that actually mean? To govern the rules of land and naval forces, just literally in plain English, means to tell the military what to do, right? People forget this all the time. We have a civilian-led military that is led in war by the commander-in-chief, the president, but it is led in daily operation by Congress. Didn't know that, did you? This happens through the Article 1, Section 8 responsibility that in practice is the National Defense Authorization Act. It's a massive bill, comes out every year, has come out every year for decades. I want to say it's like over 60 years. It's been passed consistently year over year. You can't say that for any other federal organization. And inside the NDAA are the directions to the DoD on how to do things. But let's put that aside for a second and let's get down to brass tacks. Show me the money. Everyone says Congress has the power of the purse. True. Kinda. 535 members of Congress. I don't even know how many committees and subcommittees, probably hundreds. 2 committees. 2 in the House, 2 in the Senate can deal with money. The power of the purse lies in 2 committees, really 1. The Ways and Means Committee is the only committee that can create a tax. The one committee that actually deals with money is the Appropriations Committee. Not talked about as often as I think it should be. The Appropriations Committee is the only committee in Congress that matters. Yes, I am biased, but I can back that shit up. Every year, there are 12 appropriations bills that need to pass from their 12 subcommittees. If they don't, the government shuts down. There is no other bill, law, act that if it fails to pass, something bad happens. The 12 appropriations bills must pass, and the ones that don't, their agencies get shut down. They go into either full-blown shutdown or DC's favorite thing is the continuing resolution, which means we're just going to kick the can, free spending, and we'll figure out how to pass this bill later. The appropriations bill is the only bill that spends taxpayer dollars. All the other bills, like the NDAA, that are like, oh, we're going to give $1 bazillion trillion to defense. It's great messaging, and we're glad that you're saying the same things as your partner committee over an appropriation. But that's not real money. What's real about the NDAA is you have to do business like this. You have to use commercial practices. You have to have most of that. That's all real. That's in law, and the DoD has to do that. But the dollars in the NDAA are not real. The only dollars that are real come from the Appropriations Committee. So, being biased, Congress being the supreme branch of government, the Constitution requiring all funding to originate in the House of Representatives, and the Appropriations Committee being the only committee that can spend money, my biased opinion is the House Appropriations Committee is the most and only important committee in all of Congress, especially for the purposes of you all who are trying to sell shit to the government. We can go deeper on this if you want. Hit me up. I can rant and rave on this all day. But let's get back to the point. Before they kicked out on summer break, the House Appropriations Committee passed their defense bill. The House Appropriations Committee put $831.5 billion into defense spending, which they want to spend next year. Now, the Senate's got to do their thing. The House Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense has a Senate counterpart that has to do their thing, which they also did, which is great. They put out their version of what they put out. And we're looking at somewhere we probably land this year between 831 and let's say $1 trillion for overall defense / national security spending. Why do I differentiate between defense and national security spending? Well, it's because that's actually how it's broken out in the government. At OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, that is actually like the CFO for the country, they have what's called an 050. The 050 is the total national security spending. This has accounts in the Department of Energy. It's got accounts in the Department of Justice, Department of State. So overall defense national security spending, however you want to mush those together, we're looking at the first time in history with probably $1 trillion spent this year in national security spending. Okay. And now, before you or anyone that you talk to that you think this is a good idea, but they think it's a bad idea, let's keep this in mind. Yes, defense and national security is probably going to get about $1 trillion this year. Yes, overall discretionary spending from Congress is going to be about 1.7, 1.8. And people are like, oh my God, we spend all of our money on defense. And stop. The total expenditures from the U.S. federal government this year are probably going to be north of 7, if not closer to $8 trillion. For those of you like myself that may have not done so well in school, let me run those numbers back. Congress argues over about $1.7 trillion this year. National security will get about $1 trillion of that. And you're like, well, then we only have $700 billion to spend on everything else. False. The mandatory spending pot, the part that Congress does not fight about every year, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, welfare programs, veterans programs are not debated in Congress. They are mandatory spending, and we just keep cashing those checks. That, my friends, is going to be north of $7 trillion this year. So next time someone tells you that you're a war hawk and it would just be better if we gave all the defense money to whatever pet project they have for, I don't know, saving some obscure sea creature. There's a lot of government spending. And this year, we will spend more on interest on the debt than we do on national security spending. I'm going to leave that one right there. The appropriations committees, they're looking at probably close to $1 trillion this year in national security and defense spending. You're going to have your big things in there. F-35s, check. Shipbuilding, check. That's implementation and continuation of what we're seeing out of the Maritime Dominance executive orders. That track. That's all going to keep going. The big things are going to get bought. What's really cool about these bills is it's the first time since this kind of new tech startup revolution that we're having right now in defense, where it's more than like 5 companies that build things for national security. This started in about 2015 when Ash Carter was the Secretary of Defense. That's when the Defense Innovation Unit was Defense Innovation Unit X experimental. And there was like 5 people in the unit, and they were just like living out in Silicon Valley, like tech scouting. But this year, we see massive investments into the organizations and the programs that are making life easier for you. Again, we'll probably end up doing a breakout of each one of these. And this is probably a situation where I want to get some of these folks in here to talk about this. If that's something that you want, let me know. Hit me up, comments, do the things and the stuff. Let me know, because we could get some of these folks in here. First and foremost, the Defense Innovation Unit, $1 billion. So now I was working on the Hill. That was the first time that started. The chairman of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense, literally the most important person in everyone's life that wants to sell things to the DoD, put $1 billion into the DIU for the first time in 2024 fiscal year. Don't quote me on that. But basically, this organization that was funded with like peanuts year one, and then was like operating somewhere between like 50 and 100 mil for a couple of years, is now $1 billion organization. These are the folks that know how to move fast. They use all the tools by design from day one that we all want them to use. They use commercial solutions openings to ask for things. They're like, hey, I have this problem. If you think you have a thing that solves my problem, holla. This is in contrast to the way that other submissions go out that have 20 pages of technical documents, and if you use a hex nut instead of a Phillips head to build your thing, you're disqualified, which is ridiculous. DIU just does everything on CSO. Hey, here's our problem. If you can fix it, give me a call. Cool. They also use OTs, other transaction authorities. In my world, these aren't called other transaction authorities. They're just called transaction authorities. What should be other is 5-year developmental processes for some shit I could just go buy on the open market right now. So DIU is the organization that not only uses these things aggressively, but like has really kind of pioneered a lot of the DoD use of these very flexible and fast tools to get your technology into the hands of the people who need it. So they got $1 billion. Huge. We're actually going to come back to that. They're actually getting quite a bit more, but teaser. AppFit, the program to accelerate the procurement and fielding of innovative technologies. Okay, so we went back and we said DoD procurement's all jacked up. Why is DoD procurement all jacked up? In the most basic sense, for anybody who's not literally living in this problem right now that's listening to this show, it's you decided to make a thing. And then you spent time developing it and working with the warfighters and perfecting this thing. And you're like, my thing is done. I am ready to make 1,000 of these. And everyone's like, yeah, we want you to make 1,000 of these. And we're like, cool. When can I get my contract? And they're like, oh, yeah, we actually don't buy things here. We make the things. We have to kick you over to the people in the department that buy the things. And they're like, oh, super cool widget. First time I ever heard of that. Let's put you into our buying process. And you're like, great. And they're like, yeah, best case scenario, we can buy your thing 3 years from now. Obviously causes a lot of problems for small businesses who are like, I can't wait for 3 years to sell my things because I have employees that have families to feed. And this has been proverbially called the Valley of Death, where you made a thing that everyone wants and the DoD can't figure out how to buy it fast enough and you die. All right. So the chairman of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense sought out to go fix this, which Congress does. Congress looks at what the DoD is doing as their boss or their board of advisors or directors, says, all right, your process is all jacked up. We want to fix it, but we know that that's going to take a while. So we're going to create this program. And what this program does is it gives the DoD $400 million to buy that thing that showed up today that nobody knew about yesterday, but everyone agrees is super important. AppFit is an amazing program. We will do a deep dive on that. Probably have the folks come in here and talk about it. If you don't know about AppFit at this point, do your research. If you're already participating in the process, great. I hope you win. And if you've already won, hit me up. Come talk about it. It's a unique fund within the Department of Defense that has $400 million that allows you to do low-rate initial production, scaling, and growing your company so that when that money that Congress gave you, which is good for 3 years, runs out, you're ready to go into full-rate production with your warfighter. $400 million coming out of House Appropriations. The fund has been growing or sustaining these high $100 million rates every year. The program office at DoD has expended about $1 billion since 2022 in the program, and they've done about 50 plus awards to small businesses that in many cases would have gone under without that non-dilutive infusion of cash. So just a great program. Congress is continuing that $400 million for that this year. So we're going to see a lot of DoD money just out of appropriations to begin with. I'm going to switch over to the authorizing side, the Armed Services Committees, the NDAA, and we're going to come back to money because we got something going on this year that is unique, not in the thing being unique, but in the way it's being done. So back to the Armed Services Committee. Article 1, Section 8, covered the rules of land and naval forces, the National Defense Authorization Act. National Defense Authorization Act has, in the House and the Senate, have two parts of the bill. These are huge bills, by the way, like 7,000 pages. They have two parts of the bill that are named initiatives in each one, the Forged Act and the Speed Act, Senate and House respectively, that really get after these reform initiatives. And I can tell you for a fact in both the House and the Senate, the people who are working on these are the best in the business. They are people who have spent their lives, I was going to say 5-10 years, but in some cases, folks that are working on these bills have been doing this for 15 and 20 years, recognizing that the DoD is just a jacked up place to do business. And you're seeing kind of like a wholesale movement towards reform. And I'm telling you, the people who are behind the scenes on this are the best in the business. And it really is going to fix the business environment for anybody who wants to participate in national security. We will do specific breakouts on Speed Act and Forge Act because they are worth talking about in isolation. And they're also fucking massive. So again, just trying to catch up to where we are in the year before the sprint starts again when everybody comes back in September. Additionally, in the NDA, we're seeing more stuff on MOSA, Modular Open Systems Architecture, data rights, OTA expansion, testing and evaluation, especially in the digital environment. How do we prove that the AI systems that you're bringing to market actually work, right? It's one thing to sell something on the commercial market and has a bunch of bugs and it doesn't work and it crashes. Yeah, that's fine. That's, I'm sure, normal course of business in a software company. That's not acceptable in warfighting applications. Your shit has to operate as advertised the first time, no questions. So there's a lot of thought being put into how do we validate software systems in their use cases for warfighting application when there's a lot in there. And then again, just tons and tons of work and guidance and directive on AI and how to bring more AI into department at every level, on the warfighting level, on the business process level, on the data management level, whatever. And then there's elements of the NDAAs that get into industrial base issues. So when we talk about industrial base issues, we are talking about truly things that have little to no commercial market. They are important for national security and they just need to be done. Critical minerals, rare earth, natural resources, manufacturing processes, manufacturing guidelines, restrictions, things like that are all in the industrial base side of these bills. And there are some that are great regulations that we have where it says, oh, I don't know, you can't put deep seek on government computers. Like, awesome, great, love that. But then there's other ones that we have regulations where it's like, you have to buy this thing that's made in this certain way. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, there's like 2 companies who do things like that. And they have clearly gotten their lawyers and their lobbyists to create this really weird maze of things that they're the only ones who know how to get through so that they can sell their stuff. So on the industrial base side, they're cleaning up as much of this as possible, getting after the talent pipelines, again, workforce for our contracting, our acquisition workforce, for our budget folks. They need to, one, exist, which we have like a 30% shortfall in those people, which is terrible for national security. But then 2, they need to get trained on the best business processes in the business environment. They need to understand how venture capital works and that there's different incentive structures for venture-backed companies than traditional defense contractors, right? Traditional defense contractors are making what the government asks them to when they ask them to, and then they are structuring their contracts in a cost plus where they are saying, well, we're going to charge you for everything that it costs us to do it, and then we're going to throw a profit on top. Whereas the venture capital folks and the venture capital backed companies are coming in going, we're going to make something that we know is important. You're going to buy it because it's the right thing, and we're going to make a profit, and we're not going to tell you how much it is because that's how the commercial market works. Because when you go to buy your iPhone, you don't go, well, give me a detailed cost breakdown of how much each one of those parts cost you, and then I will tell you if we're going to pay that much or not. That's not real. When the VC folks are coming into this game, they expect commercial margins. And for somebody who has been there, done that as the warfighter, who is a taxpayer, I don't necessarily have a problem with that as long as what you're bringing to the DoD and the military is truly the best that we could possibly have, because today's Tony Starks and Iron Man don't work at Skunk Works in the middle of the Nevada desert. They're in Palo Alto and Austin and Boston and the Iron Men of today are just creating the world's greatest things. And if we have to pay for that, there's no reason that we shouldn't, but it has to be the best. And we'll get there. Lots going on in Congress as well. Speed and Forged Act. We'll do a breakout on each one of those. Going back to money. So the process of buying things in the DoD and the process of Congress's role in that manifests in this terrible process that we have that dates back to the 1960s called the PPBE, the planning, programming, budgeting, and execution process. That is the 3, 4, 5-year process that creates your valley of death. So planning is exactly what it sounds like. Programming is where they start putting the nuts and bolts together and figuring out what they need. The budgeting part is where they start actually putting the budget dollars against these things. They happen in full year increments in this waterfall process that right now, we won't get into the CR, but essentially we're executing fiscal year 25 dollars. We are budgeting in the budget process for 26 because the president has submitted the 26 fiscal year budget request to Congress, and Congress is going through the appropriations for the fiscal year 26 Appropriations Act, and they're programming and planning for like out to 29, 28 right now. Yeah. That's why we have a valley of death, because the DoD is trying to figure out right now what they're going to need in like 2028 and 2029. And they're putting that shit on paper going, this is what we're going to buy in 29. Next time somebody does that and tells you that, oh, it's a process or we're planning for it or we're programming for it. You ask somebody what they're going to eat for dinner on this day 4 years from now. Yeah, it's going to change. We know that. Warfare changes too fast. The modern threat environment changes too fast. 4 years ago, we did not know that first-person view drones that could be bought at Best Buy would be weaponized and the predominant weapon system used in a modern conflict. No one could have planned for that 4 years ago, but here we are. There's more money coming this year. So we have this PPBE process, and then you have your congressional appropriations process where they give you the money for the next year. There's also a process called reconciliation. This year, it's known as the One Big Beautiful Bill. And what reconciliation allows you to do is go backwards in time, find all the money that has not yet been spent and move it to new things. Well, obviously, at the transition of an administration, you're going to see this. You're going to see the new administration go, okay, well, I definitely don't want to do a lot of the stuff that the last guy did. What haven't they spent yet? And what can I move to the things that I want? That's reconciliation in a nutshell. Again, deep dive on reconciliation, stand by. But reconciliation has passed, and it doubles down on many of the initiatives that we're seeing coming out of the White House, out of the Congress, on the traditional appropriation side. And for you all, these are the highlights. Golden Dome. So if you're in drones, counter drones, sensing, cameras, spatial awareness, there's going to be a whole new market coming real soon as the Trump administration tries to make significant investments in homeland security. 2, DIU. Remember we said DIU is getting $1 billion in the appropriations bill? Well, they have an additional $2 billion added in reconciliation. APFIT, the program to accelerate the procurement and building of innovative technologies. God, we love long acronyms. An additional $1 billion. So if you're keeping track here, I got $3 billion for DIU. I got $1.4 billion for APFIT. And then we have about $150 billion for innovation and munitions. That looks like drones. That looks like drone boats, UUVs, UAVs, UGVs, low-cost munitions, low-cost counter-UAS interceptors. I mean, it is in no uncertain terms, and I get it, I exaggerate. In no uncertain terms, this is a once in a lifetime, once in a generation investment into national security when it comes to what Congress is going to appropriate through its traditional process and what is going to come in through reconciliation is going to fundamentally change U.S. national security. This will happen once in our lifetime. This is Detroit in 1940 type shit. And we're not going to see this again. That's how big this is. Again, we'll deep dive. But the key for this is the numbers are big in reconciliation. You're seeing pots of money like $100 million for drones, $500 million for drone boats, right? Whatever. The key here is government money is only good for a certain amount of time. Operations and maintenance money, how we pay to keep the lights on at our facilities, how we pay for training, how we pay for exercises, is only good for 1 year. Congress has to reappropriate every single thing in the O&M, operations and maintenance category, every single year. We'll also deep dive colors of money. I don't know why they're called colors of money, but that's what they're called. And it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's what we're stuck with. So you got O&M, 1 year money. Research and development money, 2 year money. So that means you can spend it over a 2 year time period because research and development takes longer than paying your light bill. Tracking, everybody good? The last one is procurement. Well, it's not the last one. There's two others, military personnel and military construction, but we're not going to get into those. Procurement dollars are good for 3 years. And it's because when you have to buy things over time, there's a manufacturing tail and it just takes time to make things. So if I order 1,000 things, you might not be able to deliver them first year, and that's fine. So procurement dollars are good for over 3 years. Reconciliation dollars are not held to time spans for colors of money, which are then inherently tied to fiscal years, right? If you have procurement dollars, they expire 3 years on September 30th. They don't extend. You literally cannot extend them. If you don't obligate or expend those dollars, they go back to the Treasury. Reconciliation dollars are not held to fiscal years. The dollars in reconciliation are defined to that money. Reconciliation dollars are good for 5 years, which means we are going to be done with the first Trump administration, or I guess the second one, but this Trump administration and into another administration, and these dollars theoretically can still be spent. Now, are they? No. My guess is most reconciliation dollars are expended in the first 24 months. But when you look at things like investments into shipyard, manufacturing, the maritime industrial base, critical minerals, the strategic stockpile, rare earth, magnets, chips, those investments at like the CapEx level, like the capital investment into infrastructure and facilities, they're going to take longer than pumping $1 billion into the new drone industry, which everybody's going to knock out like yesterday. So not tied to fiscal years, which is hugely helpful because they have a lot more flexibility in how to spend that. And it will lead to better buying practices because they're not going to be held to a near-term deadline for the end of the next fiscal year. So reconciliation dollars are not unique in the fact that a reconciliation is happening, but in the way they're being spent and mostly focused on national security is a huge opportunity for anybody who's in or wants to get in to national security, technology. All right, we're almost home. We're getting there. It's been a long year. No bullshit. Like, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I can't remember a year where there has been more done for defense technology, innovation, and getting our national security, both at home and abroad, right in such an aggressive way. This first, 8 months of this presidency and this year have been hugely impactful for this community. So, all right, last one. The DOD, right? White House, executive orders, Congress, appropriations bill, National Defense Authorization Act, getting those going, telling the DOD what to do. So now the DOD needs to figure out how to implement both the EOs and the bills coming out of Congress and actually do the damn thing. So what we've seen out of the department so far, new Secretary of Defense has basically put its flag in the ground and said, hey, I have priorities: lethality, readiness, reform, and working with partners, right? We are a Department of Defense, right? The president often jokingly says, this is my Secretary of War. Before 1946, that was actually the term. We had a Department of War. It changed probably because, I don't know, World War II was over and people wanted a kinder, gentler government. Who knows? But he's the Secretary of War. He's focusing on war stuff. Do we have enough stuff? And are we ready enough? Are we big, fast, strong enough? Are we trained enough? Are we postured in all the right places around the world to stop the bad guys from doing something, aka deterrence? Or if they fuck around and find out, are we going to win? That is the number one, number two, number three, and number four priority of the DoD, no matter what. It hasn't always been, but it is now and always should be. Can we deter our adversaries? And if not, can we defeat them? And if the answer is no, fucking fix that. If the answer is yes, we can move on to priority 7, 8, and 9, with the first 1 through 6 being lethality and deter and defeat the adversary. Readiness, huge issue. We have seen a decline in training, in exercises, in flight hours, which budgetary constraints and mismanagement and just not doing things the right way all the time. Also, not all on the DoD. Congress, I'm looking at you. Continuing resolution freezes last year's money. If I just put a whole bunch of money for the next year into training, but you haven't passed that bill yet, I can't do all that extra training. Continuing resolutions really hurt readiness. They really hurt training, and they really hurt modernization efforts. Government shutdowns are so much worse because then training just straight up stops. Fortunately, we haven't had an extended period of government shutdown, but continuing resolutions suck for readiness. There's a lot of emphasis on training. And when I talk about training, I'm like, get your ass on the rifle range and shoot bullets. Get your ass in the airplane and fly training. Not, sit around and get a PowerPoint on, somebody's feelings, right? That shit's going away. And it's focus on, are you ready to go kill the bad guy today if called upon by your nation, which is phenomenal. Reform initiatives, we've talked about that. Those are all being implemented. We've seen out of this Secretary of Defense and this DoD one-page memos. You will buy software with commercial practices, and no one below me can change the ruling on that, Pete. Like, that's phenomenal, right? In the military, we call that a big blue arrow leader, right? When you see like the war plans from like World War II and D-Day, like there's a big blue arrow that's like the Army is going to go here and the Marine Corps, well, the Marine Corps wasn't in D-Day, but like Army Unit 1 will go here and then Army Unit 2 will go there, because they're not going to like put a dot for every little soldier. It's just like, hey, generally we're going in this direction. Leaders who do that really empower their people to get after it and own the problem. Pete's a big blue arrow leader. He's just like, do commercial, signed Pete. And now all of the people that are like, yes, God, I've been waiting for this forever, who know all of the intricate details of how to do that. And they know where all the skeletons are buried from all of the people who have used the lawyers and the lobbyists and their influence to like create these like roadblocks that they're the only ones who can get around. All that shit's going away. So that's phenomenal. Love that. And there's also a focus on industrial surge capacity. I already mentioned Detroit in 1940. This is a real problem. The U.S. GDP, the portion of the U.S. GDP that was contributed by U.S. manufacturing in 1940, when we were able to do that, doesn't exist to the same volume or quantity that does today. We have offshored a lot of our manufacturing in the U.S., and there's a realization that, hey, if we need to mobilize the economy for World War III. We just don't have the same tools that we did back in 1940. And as such, we need to start reaching out to that market and say, hey, look, man, I got it. You build race cars. Super cool. Love your race cars. Not really a DOD play. I mean, Sergeant Mike would fucking love one, but like, yeah, right, probably not a DOD play for like race cars. But if I called you up one day and was like, yo, those machines that you used to make those race cars, they would be really good at making, I don't know, fucking dune buggies for SOCOM. If the shit goes down, would you be willing to start doing that? And we're going out to the industrial base saying, look, we're not asking you to do anything except let us know that if the shit really does pop off, we can count on you to make X, Y, and Z, because if not, we just aren't going to make them. And then we're going to be fucked, right? When GM shut down their car line to make Jeeps, that changed the game. Like World War II was won because we were able to make more things than the Nazis. We don't have that advantage against the CCP today. They can outproduce us 4-1, right? It's the first time since the war in 1812 that the United States is facing an adversary that is demographically and economically superior. They have more people, they have more money, and they have more industry than we do at a rate of 4-1. So whether that's dudes with rifles or people on the shop floor, they have 4 times the assets that we do. In a conflict situation with the US and the CCP, we're not Russia. We're Ukraine. We're the small guy who needs to think asymmetrically and punch above our weight class, because if it just comes down to dudes with rifles, we lose. So lots of focus in the DoD right now of tapping into the commercial base and saying, hey, are you on the team or not? If the things happen, are you going to show up? And 1, yes or no, but then 2, God, I just hope everyone in America knows that is going on and is raising their hand to help. Because I mean, I don't care if you make clothing or, you make outdoor gear or you make some kind of mechanical, whatever the fuck. Like, we need to know that America is going to get on board if we need the American commercial economy. Because I'll tell you what, there are way too many fucking American companies that are fully in bed with the CCP that do not give me a warm and fuzzy that if the shit goes down, they're going to choose us over a Forex market. Just saying. Also out of the DoD, Gold Dome, already talked about that. Kind of taking the model of Iron Dome from Israel, just air and missile defense systems, nationwide, homeland security, air and missile defense, drone defense, counter UAS, surveillance, sensing, just making sure that the bad guys, can't just fly a spy balloon over the country unimpeded, right? A lot of people like to make fun of the name or whatever. At the end of the day, this has been a long time coming. The last one I want to talk about is, as this starts to shift, we have to think about the continuum of how this happens, right? The White House or Congress says, do this, right? And then those are orders to the DoD. But the DoD, when you say DoD and you think about the Secretary of Defense, like, that's mostly a civilian organization out of the Pentagon and the DoD with a bunch of like super smart people, but they're like the operations side of the business of defense. Very different than the military services and the warfighters. So how does this roll down as we start seeing EOs that say drone dominance, AI? Well, what does that look like when it gets down to the Army? And I picked the Army very specifically, love my Corps, and they've done great things. General Berger was well ahead of this power curve of 1, facing the threat, 2, moving faster, becoming more agile. General Berger, the former Commandant of the Marine Corps, and now the current Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Smith, continuing that legacy. The Marine Corps was well ahead of times. So just for the record. But the Army has been the first one that has shown significant change since these new EOs came out. And just to call attention to what this looks like in practice and for you all, and really the things you should be looking for as you're scanning the horizon of opportunities for how to work with, our warfighters, really at the end of the day. Like, these are the troops. The Army put out a solicitation that is possibly the greatest leading indicator of where the DoD is going, and in full transparency, what I want to see out of everything from the DoD when it comes to needing something short of an aircraft carrier. The Army puts out a proposal for first-person view drones, okay? Like, let's just be really honest here. This is go to your local hobby shop drones. Small, easy to use, like, kids are rolling around with them like there's Red Bull drone racing leagues, right? That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about, 50,000 foot spy planes, right? We're talking about a couple $100,000 first person view racing drones. The Army comes out with a proposal, and again, paraphrasing, you go look up the real words, but it's basically like, if you can make 10,000 drones a year and you can do it for $2,000 a pop, sign up here. Well, Jesus, that's as easy as do this thing, Pete. That's what I want to see out of everything. Don't tell me how to solve the problem, right? I always go back to the Marine Corps in Korea. The Marine Corps in Korea was the first one who really used helicopters. And why? Because North Korea is incredibly mountainous. And this is the first time we saw the application of helicopters at any real use case in the military. And it's because they had to get up and over mountains, and with no runways to take off planes. Well, how do you do that? You fucking walk, you climb. It sucks. People freeze to death. Frozen Chosen, Incheon is awful. Like, people are just freezing to death because it sucked. Well, imagine that today. Hey, I need to get to the top of this mountain. Oh, in the commercial sector. I need to get to the top of this mountain. Oh, cool. Awesome. Well, how do you want to do that? I'm like, I don't know. You tell me. Well, if you work for a climbing company, you're going to be like, well, we got the best climbing gear. We can get you up top of the mountain. Okay, that's a idea. If you're in construction, you're like, well, I'll just build you a staircase. Okay, that's an idea. Somebody might pop up and be like, well, I got this helicopter thing. That gets you right up to the top super quick. You're like, oh yeah, that one. Okay, I'm digging that one. But who's to say somebody doesn't come out of the blue and be like, teleporter? Yep. No, just get in this little, box looking thing, and you'll be on the other side of the mountain. We got that. It's a thing. That's a thing. Yep, that's a thing. Yep, just get in. If the government puts out a requirement that says, I want stairs, they're getting stairs. If the government just says, here's my problem, bring me solutions, the warfighter benefits. And at the end of the day, everyone in the Department of Defense and in the national security and intelligence community apparatus works for the warfighter. For good old Sergeant Mike back in the day with big ass helmet on and his M16 service rifle that signed up to give his fucking life for this country. You all work for them. They all work for them. We all work for them. The reason that we're doing innovation is for them. The reason that we're reforming processes is for them. They have a problem. We're trying to solve it. Don't make it more difficult. If the problem is, I need to get to the top of the mountain, just let them tell us that. We will give you solutions, and you buy the one that they like. That's it. In this case, the Army said, I need first-person view drones. I looked at what's going on in Ukraine. This is going to become as prevalent as the rifle, pistol, and hand grenade. We need first-person view drones in every tactical formation. We need a lot. There are a lot of fucking people in the Army. How many do they want? I don't know. They didn't say that. They said if you could make $10,000 a year at $2,000 a pop, give us a call. Sign up. That's the answer. I want everything in the DoD to look like this. Tell me your problem. Open the window. Let everybody come run in. Tell you their thing. And pick the one that best works for the warfighter. Don't build these fancy proposals or these fancy solicitations that are so wordsmithed to death, it's only going to go to Lockheed, Boeing, Raytheon, or Northrop, because that's the bullshit we've been dealing with for the last 20 years. So, all in all, at every level of our government, White House, Congress, DOD, and down into the services, we have had possibly, probably, definitely the most momentum and velocity to get shit right in a 6-8 month period than I've ever seen in 20 years of doing this, and I could not be happier. So now what? You're going to need to figure out how to apply this to your everyday business. So here's my short take on that, unsolicited advice. Know the high level strategies. Read these EOs and fucking quote them when you talk to people. Oh, that's a really cool widget. You know, hey, no, this thing supports this EO that told me to do this. Oh, yeah, no, you're right. Yep, that tracks. Know your high-level strategy. Know your EOs. Know the national security strategy. Know the national defense strategy. Understand service modernization plans, Force Design 2030. Know what the user is asking for and know what direction they're getting from their senior leadership to make sure that you are aligned with what they're doing. After that, use that language when you engage with your users, with the warfighters, with the acquisition people. Use that language and say, I am satisfying the thing that you were told to do. Because if you're not satisfying something that they were told to do on high, it's not going to happen. We are not in a day and age of where we're just buying shit because it's cool or it's fun or somebody knows somebody else. We have an increasingly dangerous global environment, and we have an entire government that is focused on making sure we don't need to fight World War III. That includes buying a lot of shit we need and not buying things that we don't. Align everything you're doing to those mission priorities. Quote that chapter and verse in everything you're doing. Lead with warfighter focus. Lead with strategic intent. And then may the best technology win. Because everyone's going to come to the table saying, my drone satisfies the drone EO. Great. Can it fly in a contested environment in Russia over Beijing? Can it XYZ deliver a payload? Can it fly for this duration? Then it gets into, if you are told no, and it's just because you don't meet the warfighter need, change, get better, or go do something else. But the fact of the matter is right now we're dealing in a time of urgency. You need to operate with that urgency. You need to speak with that urgency, and you need to get educated on all of this stuff so that you can engage as a small business, a startup, somebody who wants to participate in national security in a way that you will be most effective and impactful in the shortest amount of time, because tick tock, 2027 is coming up really quick. And I haven't been in a skiff in a while, but I don't feel a lot of shit has changed. And the CCP is still moving in the direction of doing some stuff that we might have to go deal with. Deter or defeat. Everything we're doing right now is showing them that we are dead ass serious about defeating them, which hopefully leads to deterrence. That's the focus you need to go in when you deal with your DoD customers. No one wants a cool widget because it's a cool widget. What warfighter need are you satisfying, and who is telling them to do that thing? For the first time in a very long time, all of that is very public information, and that needs to be your new vocabulary. Beyond that, we'll get into all these details. There's a lot of technical stuff in there. Is this for me? What does that thing mean? We'll get into all that. That's why we do this. Tell us what you need. Tell us what you need to know. Tell us what you don't understand. We'll get into it. We'll bring the experts in. We'll figure it out. Doing business with the government is never going to be easy, but it's getting easier on a daily basis, and we're just here to help you figure all that out. Hit us up on the comments. Hit us up on email. If there's something that you don't understand, if there's something you want to dig deeper on, if there's someone that you want us to bring on, one of the experts, one of the people, we could sit here and we could do a deep dive on that and really get into it. We're here for you. So just let us know. See you next time.